The single window in Lily's cramped apartment framed a sliver of the rain-slick city, a world of neon and noise she observed but never truly touched. For 3 years, she had lived this half-life, a ghost in a borrowed shell. She knelt on the cold linoleum, eyes closed, not in prayer, but in assessment. In her mind's eye, she could see them. The faint, shimmering threads of gold that bound her to him, to Jake Lane. They were weaker now than they had been 1,000 days ago. Frayed by each insult, each act of servitude. This was her penance, her path to freedom, her existence as a sin. A bioengineered servant class with manufactured compliance was a lie she wore like a shroud. But the ridicule it earned her was real. She remembered the laughter, sharp and dismissive, echoing in boardrooms and lavish parties. Even Jake, the very center of her karmic prison, would sometimes laugh along with his friends, a casual cruelty that chipped away at the golden threads more effectively than any deliberate malice. Let them laugh, she would think, her expression placid, her focus absolute. Every chuckle, every dismissive glance, unraveled the knot. The origin of that knot was a memory she kept buried beneath centuries of others. Yet it was the one that held her captive. A flash of a desolate, snow-covered field during an ancient famine. She was a child then, bleeding out from a wound that would have been fatal to a mortal, her immortal essence flickering like a dying candle. A boy barely older than her apparent form had found her. He'd torn a strip from his own meager tunic to bind her wound, sharing his last piece of stale bread, his small hands trembling in the biting wind. He hadn't known what he was saving, only that he couldn't leave her to die. That boy had reincarnated through countless lives, a soul burning with ambition, until he became Jake Lane, CEO of Lane Industries. And she, who had walked the earth for millennia, was unable to ascend, tethered by the profound weight of a life debt to a man who had no idea who or what she truly was. This was the paradox that defined her servitude. Every time he inadvertently hurt her, a thread frayed. Every time she served him, anticipating a need or quietly solving a problem, another strand grew thin. His casual disregard was her salvation. Her silent endurance was the payment. Tonight, the payment was to be made in public. The seaside bar was a cacophony of brash laughter and the dull thrum of bass. Salt spray misted the air, mingling with the scent of expensive whiskey. Lily stood a respectful 5 paces behind Jake's chair, a silent, unmoving statue amidst the raucous celebration. Jake was holding court, his magnetic charm drawing in everyone at the table. Seriously, Jake, she follows you around like a lost puppy, a man named Alex slurred, gesturing with his glass toward Lily. She's got to be Sedan's #1 sim. You could tell her to jump off the pier and she'd only ask how high. The table erupted in laughter. Jake smirked, leaning back in his chair with an air of careless ownership. She's programmed for loyalty. It's what she's for. Another friend, Marco, clapped Jake on the shoulder. I heard you're thinking of upgrading, putting this model up for sale. The humiliation was a physical wave, but Lily's expression remained a mask of serene neutrality. She didn't hear their words as insults, but as the grinding of a key in a lock. Closer, she thought, feeling a faint tremor along the karmic lines. Almost there. Her gaze was fixed on a point just beyond them, on the dark, churning water of the ocean. Just then, the atmosphere at the table shifted. A collective intake of breath, a sudden drop in volume. A woman with hair the color of spun gold and eyes like ice glided toward them, a vision in a white silk dress that seemed to shimmer in the bar's dim light. Mandy. Jake's posture changed instantly. The casual arrogance sharpened into focused intensity. He stood, his smile suddenly genuine, all his attention narrowing to a single point. Mandy, I didn't know you were coming. I was in the neighborhood, she said, her voice a low purr that cut through the bar's nose. Her eyes flicked dismissively over Lily before landing back on Jake, a silent question in their depths. Jake's friends shuffled to make room for her, their earlier bravado replaced by deferential quiet. Mandy settled into the seat beside Jake, her presence commanding the space. A waiter placed a steaming platter of spiced crabs in the center of the table. Mandy eyed it with a delicate pout. "Oh, I'd love one, but I can't bear the thought of ruining my manicure." It was the opening Jake needed. Eager to impress, to cater to her every whim, he turned. His voice was casual, almost an afterthought, but it landed like a slap. "Lily, shell the crabs for Mandy." The order was a new low, a deliberate act of degradation meant to showcase his power for the woman he wanted back. Lily felt the eyes of the entire table on her. She stepped forward without a word, her movements fluid and precise. She picked up a crab, its shell sharp and hot against her skin. She didn't reach for a cracker or a fork. With practiced ease, her bare fingers found the seams, cracking the carapace with a sharp, clean snap. She meticulously extracted the tender white meat, placing it on a clean plate before setting it in front of Mandy. She worked in absolute silence, her hands moving with an efficiency that was both mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. One crab, then another. The sticky residue coated her fingers, the scent of spice clinging to her. But as she worked, a sliver of confusion pierced her disciplined focus. She felt for the golden threads, expecting this profound act of subservience, this public debasement, to sever another strand. Nothing. The lines remained exactly as they were, shimmering and intact. For the first time in 3 years, a flicker of doubt entered her mind. She continued her task, her hands never faltering, but her inner stillness was fractured. Why did this, the most humiliating act of all, do nothing to repay her debt? The sterile, frantic energy of the emergency room was a world away from the quiet servitude of Jake's penthouse. Beeping monitors provided a frantic rhythm to the hurried footsteps of nurses and the clipped, urgent tones of doctors. On a gurney at the center of the chaos lay Mandy, her designer dress shredded and stained a horrifying crimson. She was ghostly pale, a stark contrast to the dark blood matting her hair. "She's lost too much blood," a doctor announced, his voice tight with pressure as he addressed a stone-faced Jake. "We need a transfusion, now. She's a H negative. We don't have enough in the blood bank." The words hung in the air, a medical death sentence. Jake's gaze, cold and calculating, swiveled from Mandy's prone form and landed on Lily, who stood silently by the doorframe, a ghost in the background of his life as always. In that moment, she was not a person to him. She was a solution, a resource. "You," he said, his voice a low command that cut through the hospital noise. He strode towards her, closing the space between them until she could feel the icy radiation of his panic. "You're Rh negative." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact he'd gleaned from her employee file, a detail he had stored away and forgotten until it became useful. "She needs blood. Your blood. Go with the nurse." There was no please, no flicker of concern for her well-being. He was ordering her to drain a part of herself to save the very woman who made her life a living hell. Lily hesitated, a tremor, barely perceptible, ran through her. It wasn't fear of the needle or the sight of blood. It was a deeper, primal instinct. Her immortal essence was tied to her physical form, and this blood was more than just plasma and cells. It was a conduit for her life force. Giving it away, especially in this quantity, would diminish her. It would leave her vulnerable, weak, and delay the final settlement of her karmic debt. The sheer unfairness of it to pour her life into her tormentor at the command of the man she was indebted to was a cruelty that tasted like ash in her mouth. Jake saw her hesitation not as a moment of existential crisis, but as a negotiation, a disgusting, opportunistic power play. His features hardened, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, manipulative whisper. "Do this, Lily, he murmured, his eyes locking on to hers, trying to hypnotize her with a hollow promise. Do this for me, and we'll make it official. I'll take you to meet my grandfather. Everyone will know you're with me. Isn't that what you've always wanted? The lie was so blatant it was almost insulting. He was dangling the fantasy he believed she clung to. The pathetic dream of a servant girl winning the prince. He didn't understand that his approval was a cage, not a prize. That within his pose and offer lay her only path to freedom. The debt, it had to be paid, one final, deep cut, and she could be free. The promise was worthless, but the act itself would bring her closer to ascension. Her nod was barely a movement, a slight dip of her chin. She allowed the nurse to lead her to a sterile cubicle, her steps feeling heavier than they had a moment before. She didn't look at Jake. She couldn't. As the nurse prepped her arm and the needle slid into her vein, a coldness spread through her that had nothing to do with the antiseptic swab. She watched, detached, as her vibrant, life-infused blood filled the plastic bag, a dark river of sacrifice destined for Mandy. With every pulse, she felt a dimming within herself, a subtle fading of the light that sustained her. The world seemed to lose a fraction of its color, its edges growing soft and blurry. Hours later, feeling drained and fragile, Lily found herself being propelled not to the quiet solace of her room, but into the back of Jake's town car. He was making good on his word, though his version of it was a cudgel, not a reward. They pulled up to an imposing stone mansion, the ancestral home of the Lane family, a place that reeked of old money and dynastic power. Jake led her into a cavernous study paneled in dark, foreboding mahogany. An old man with eyes as sharp and unforgiving as chips of flint sat behind a massive desk, a half-smoked cigar resting in a crystal ashtray. This was Mr. Lane Sr., the patriarch, the true king of the empire Jake was set to inherit. Grandfather, Jake said, his tone a mix of deference and pride. This is Lily. He presented her like an object, a curiosity he brought home for inspection. The old man's gaze swept over her once, a dismissive, head-to-toe appraisal that took less than a second. He didn't bother to stand or offer a hand. Frivolous, he pronounced, his voice a gravelly rasp, looks flashy. Not our kind. He took a long, slow draw from his cigar, blowing a plume of smoke towards the ceiling. At least Mandy had ambition, even if she was a snake. This one, what is her purpose? To cling. The words were designed to humiliate, to strip her down and find her wanting. And they did. The sting was sharp, potent, yet, as Lily looked into the old man's severe face, a strange sense of recognition pierced through the shame. A flicker of a memory from a time long past, a depredating Jake's entirely. This man, in another life, in another form, had been a helper, an unwitting piece of the karmic puzzle she was here to solve. The realization settled over her, a sudden, unexpected calm. This meeting wasn't just Jake's cruel theater. It was a necessary convergence. Finding a strength she didn't know she still possessed, Lily met the old man's gaze directly. Her voice, though quiet, was steady and clear, cutting through the heavy, smoke-filled air. I'm not here for your approval, sir, she said, her words directed at the patriarch but intended for them both. I'm just settling my debt. The statement, devoid of the simpering devotion Jake expected, ignited a fire in his eyes. He saw her quiet dignity as defiance, a rejection of the role he had assigned her. In front of his grandfather, he needed to reassert his dominance to put her back in her place. He let out a short, derisive laugh. Stop pretending, Lily, he sneered, his voice dripping with condescending venom. We all know the truth. You're obsessed with me. You've been clinging to this fantasy since the day I brought you in. He took a step back, physically distancing himself from her as if she were contagious. Just stop clinging. It's pathetic. The final words were a public execution. He reinforced her image as a simple, grasping sycophant, stripping away the last of her agency in his world. He left her standing there in the center of the vast, opulent room, utterly alone, the weight of her sacrifice and his scorn pressing down on her like a physical shroud. For the first time in 3 years, Lily wanted something for herself. The desire was a foreign, sun-warm sensation spreading through her chest. It wasn't a need for survival or a means to an end. It was pure, unadulterated want. The dress was the cause. Hanging in the most exclusive section of a boutique she was only allowed in as Jake's shadow, it was a cascade of midnight silk, embroidered with constellations of tiny, shimmering crystals. It looked like a piece of the night sky spun into fabric. When she slipped it on in the hushed, velvet-lined dressing room, the cool silk felt less like a garment and more like a second skin she was meant to wear. For a fleeting moment, looking at her reflection under the soft, forgiving lights, she wasn't the subservient synth, the silent attendant. She was just Lily. Her moment of private rebellion was shattered by the chime of the boutique's door, followed by a familiar, cawing laugh, Mandy. And where Mandy was, Jake was never far behind. Lily's stomach tightened. She should have known better than to indulge in such a fantasy. He saw her the moment he entered, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on her. A flicker of something unreadable surprise, appreciation, crossed his face before it was wiped clean, replaced by his usual impassive mask. Mandy, clinging to his arm like an expensive vine, followed his line of sight. Her perfectly sculpted lips tightened into a moue of distaste before blooming into a predatory smile. "Oh, that's it," Mandy declared, her voice carrying across the silent boutique. "That's the one I saw online. The starlight gown." She turned her face up to Jake, a flawless performance of desire in her eyes. "Darling, I must have it." Jake's attention shifted from Lily to Mandy, his focus absolute. He nodded once, a gesture of immediate capitulation. His eyes found Lily's again, and the casual indifference in his voice was a sharper cut than any insult. "Lily, take it off. Mandy wants it." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. All the air went out of Lily's lungs. This was it. The final thread of the karmic line that bound her to him pulsed, a faint, silvery cord stretching taut. For 3 years, she had endured countless humiliations, serving his manipulative ex-girlfriend, cleaning up his messes, standing silently in corners while he conducted his life. Every act of servitude, every swallowed retort, had frayed the bond. This dress, this one beautiful thing she had allowed herself to want, was the final offering required, the ultimate act of self-denial. She met his gaze, her own suddenly clear and still. "Is this," she asked, her voice low but steady, "your last request of me?" Jake frowned, a flicker of irritation crossing his features at her strange formality. Mandy scarfed beside him. "What is she talking about? Just get her to take off my dress." "Jake." "Yes," Jake said, his tone clipped and impatient. "It is. Now hurry up. We have reservations." Confirmation. The final seal. A strange calm settled over Lily. It was the quiet that comes after a long and brutal storm. She nodded slowly, a gesture of acceptance. Without breaking eye contact with a suddenly unsettled Jake, she reached behind her back. The delicate, almost invisible zipper hissed as it descended her spine. The sound was a final, quiet severance. She shrugged her shoulders, and the magnificent dress, the piece of the night sky, slid from her body. It pooled at her feet in a dark, glittering circle of silk and crystal. Stepping out of it, clad only in her simple undergarments, she felt the profound, metaphysical shift. A sharp, cold snap, like a thread breaking under immense tension, echoed in her soul, and then nothing. The constant, low-level hum of her obligation to him, A presence that had been her shadow for 1,000 days, was gone. She was untethered, free. With a resolute expression that was entirely her own, she picked up her discarded uniform, walked back into the dressing room without a word, and changed. She emerged moments later, bypassing the stunned silence of Jake and the triumphant smirk of Mandy. She walked out of the boutique and didn't look back, leaving him staring at the empty space where she had stood. A beautiful dress lying abandoned on the floor, and the sudden, inexplicable feeling of profound loss coiling in his gut. 2 days later, the sky broke. A ferocious storm descended on the city, turning the skyline into a grey, churning watercolor. Jake stood in his penthouse apartment, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The unease that had settled over him in the boutique hadn't left. It was a phantom limb, an ache for something he couldn't name. He tried calling Lily's service number. It was disconnected. It made no sense. His phone buzzed, tearing him from his thoughts. Mandy's name flashed on the screen. He answered and was met with a weak, static-laced sob. Jake. Oh, thank God. I'm lost, Mandy. Where are you? He demanded, his entire posture snapping to attention. I went for a hike up on Blackwood Mountain, she cried, her voice punctuated by what sounded like chattering teeth. To clear my head. The storm came so fast I twisted my ankle. I think it's broken. It's so cold. Jake, the line went dead. A primal, protective instinct overrode every other thought. It was the same instinct that had made him pull a little girl from the path of a speeding car all those years ago. He didn't question. He didn't hesitate. He was out the door in seconds, shrugging on a waterproof jacket and grabbing his keys, his mind already mapping the treacherous mountain roads, his heart pounding with a familiar, ingrained loyalty. Miles away, in a small, anonymous apartment, Lily felt it. Not as a karmic command, but as a faint, desperate echo across a now empty psychic space. It was Jake's panic, his raw terror for another's safety. Her debt was paid. She owed him nothing. She could ignore it, turn over, and let the storm sing her to sleep. But the memory of a young boy with scraped knees and fierce, protective eyes was branded on her soul. Despite everything, despite the years of humiliation, that boy was still in there, and he was charging headfirst into danger. With a sigh that was part exasperation, part resignation, she pulled on her boots. It was no longer an obligation this time. It was a choice. An hour later, soaked and shivering under the cold comfort of a gas station awning, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She answered cautiously. Is this Lily? Mandy's voice was crisp and clear, completely devoid of panic. She sounded like she was sipping champagne. Mandy, where are you? Jake is though. I know where Jake is, Mandy purred, a chilling amusement in her tone. He's probably halfway up a muddy mountain by now, playing the hero. It's so predictable. Lily froze, the rain dripping from her hair feeling like shards of ice. What are you talking about? Your ankle, I'm perfectly fine. Darling, manicure appointment in an hour, Mandy said with a dismissive laugh. I was never on the mountain. I just needed to be sure, you know. After you made that little scene at the boutique, I had to know if he would still come for me. No matter what, a little test of loyalty. And, as always, he passed with flying colors. The cold that seeped into Lily's bones had nothing to do with the storm. It was the Arctic chill of pure, calculated cruelty. Mandy hadn't just manipulated Jake. She had weaponized his best quality, his fierce, protective heart-hand aimed at a phantom in a hurricane, just to suit her own ego. The depth of the deception, the sheer cold-bloodedness of it, left Lily utterly breathless. And in that moment, she understood that her struggle had never truly been about repaying a debt to Jake. It had been about surviving the machinations of a woman who saw love not as a partnership, but as a kingdom to be conquered, no matter who was left broken on the battlefield. The sterile white of the VIP hospital room was suffocating. Jake Lane, his face etched with exhaustion and adorned with fresh scratches from his frantic mountain search, leaned against the headboard. Across from him, Mandy sobbed into her hands, her arm wrapped in a pristine white bandage. It seemed more for theatrical effect than medical necessity. "She did this, Jake," Mandy whispered, her voice cracking with practiced fragility. She lifted her head, revealing tear-streaked cheeks and eyes that gleamed with triumph. "I went to her apartment, just to talk, to ask her to leave you alone. She got so angry. She said I didn't deserve you, that she was the one who belonged by your side. Then she pushed me." My arm hit the edge of a table. Jake's jaw tightened. The image clicked into place with horrifying ease, confirming every suspicion he'd ever held. For 3 years, Lily had been a shadow of clawing subservience, a human synth whose devotion was both useful and deeply unsettling. He had always suspected a volatile obsession lurked beneath her placid surface. Just then, the door opened. Lily stood there, her expression unreadable, her gaze fixed on Jake. Her hand was wrapped in a crude, bloody quarter wound from the same chaotic search that had scratched his own face. But he didn't see her injury. He only saw the monster Mandy had painted. "You," he snarled, his voice a low growl. "You finally showed your true colors." Lily said nothing. Her silence was a canvas onto which he projected all his frustration, his guilt over Mandy, and his simmering contempt for what he saw as Lily's pathetic, one-sided love. "Did you think hurting her would make me want you?" he spat, rising from the bed. "Did you think I would ever choose a pathetic, desperate simp over her?" Still, she was silent. Her calmness was an affront, a quiet rebellion he couldn't tolerate. Mandy's weeping grew louder, a perfectly timed score for the unfolding drama. Jake's eyes, cold and merciless, fell on Lily's injured hand. An ugly, primitive impulse for punishment took hold. "Guards," he commanded, his voice echoing in the quiet room. 2 of his security detail stepped forward. "Hold her. Make her understand what happens when you touch what's mine." The guards hesitated for a fraction of a second, their professional composure faltering at the raw cruelty of the order. But their loyalty was to the man who signed their checks. They seized Lily's arms, their grips like iron vices. She didn't struggle. Her body was pliant, her eyes never leaving Jake's. He nodded to the head of his detail, a man who carried a multi-tool on his belt. "A lesson in consequences." The guard pulled out the tool, flicking open a short, wicked blade. He took Lily's uninjured hand, turning it palm up. She watched, her face a mask of serene acceptance. Inside, a quiet, ancient part of her soul made its final calculation. "This is it," she thought, not with fear, but with the profound finality of an account being settled. "The blood he gave to save me as a child, returned in full." This final drop of pain severs the last thread. The blade sliced across her palm. A clean, crimson line bloomed against her skin, the pain sharp and immediate. A single drop of blood fell to the polished linoleum floor. In that exact moment, a low, guttural rumble of thunder shook the hospital. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. To everyone else, it was the start of a storm. To Lily, it was the sound of a cosmic chain shattering. She felt it, the karmic line that had tethered her to Jake Lane for decades. The glowing cord of obligation that had defined her existence simply vanished. It was gone. She was free. The guards released her, without a word, a tear, or a single glance back. Lily turned and walked out of the room. She moved past the nurse's station, through the lobby, and found the stairwell to the roof. The wind that met her there was violent, whipping her hair and clothes as the sky churned with bruised, purple clouds. She walked to the center of the rooftop, the sprawling city a glittering, meaningless tapestry below. She closed her eyes, not in prayer, but in farewell. A bolt of lightning, impossibly thick and blindingly white, tore through the sky. It didn't strike the rooftop, it converged on it, drawn to the single, still figure as if she were a lodestone of immense power. For a breathtaking instant, her form was silhouetted against a wall of pure energy. Then, with a cataclysmic thunderclap that rattled windows for miles, the light vanished, and so did she. All that remained was a circular scorch mark on the wet concrete and the smell of ozone on the rain-swept air. Within hours, the news was everywhere. Unprecedented meteorological event, freak lightning strike hits downtown hospital. Eyewitnesses report a lone figure on the roof. Authorities have identified her as Lily, a personal assistant to Lane Corp's CEO Jake Lane. She is missing and presumed deceased. Jake sat in his penthouse, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand, watching the reports on a loop. Another stunt, he muttered to himself, the alcohol doing little to numb the cold, unfamiliar dread coiling in his gut, trying to make me feel guilty. She'd turn up in a day or two, expecting me to beg for her forgiveness. But as the days bled into a week, the dread grew teeth. The scorch mark on the roof was real. The security footage showed her walking up, but never coming down. The world believed she was dead. A part of him, a part he refused to acknowledge, was starting to fear they were right. It was his father who shattered his denial. The old man didn't visit. He sent an emissary. Caleb Shaw, the stoic heir to his father's top security firm, arrived at Jake's apartment with a tablet. Mr. Lane Sr. requested I deliver this to you directly, Caleb said, his tone flat and professional. It was recovered from a deep storage cloud server linked to Ms. Lily's personal devices. The original file was deleted from her phone, but the server retained a ghost copy. Jake took the tablet. On the screen was a single audio file. He pressed play. Mandy's voice, dripping with smug satisfaction, filled the silent room. It was a recording of a call she'd made to a friend hours before Jake found her on the mountain. Honestly, it's easy. I just sent him a fake SOS from a burner phone. Said I was stranded up on the trail. He'll come running like the loyal puppy he is. As for his little synth pet, I wiped the security footage of me leaving my apartment. By the time he finds me, I'll have a story all ready about how she threatened me. He's such an idiot when it comes to me. A few tears, and he'll believe anything I say. The tablet slipped from Jake's numb fingers, clattering onto the marble floor. The recording played on, a venomous echo in the vast, empty space. Every cruel word he'd spoken, every dismissive gesture, every ounce of his blind, arrogant faith in Mandy collapsed inward, crushing him. He saw Lily's face, impassive, silent, enduring. He saw the blade slicing across her palm. The blood, his order, his fault. He hadn't just punished an obsessive assistant. He had brutalized the woman his own father said had a life debt to him. A woman who had served him for 3 years without complaint. And for what? A lie. He stumbled back, a strangled sound escaping his throat. It wasn't just grief or regret. It was the soul-shattering realization that he had destroyed something pure and irreplaceable. He had severed the bond himself, with his own bare hands. And now she was gone. The silence she left behind was no longer a sign of subservience. It was an eternal, deafening judgment. The cavernous living room, once a symbol of Jake Lane's untouchable power, now felt like a mausoleum. Cold marble floors reflected the severe lines of minimalist furniture, and the stormy grey sky pressing against the panoramic windows. In the center of it all, a tablet lay on the glass coffee table, its screen a glowing indictment. Mandy, draped in a silk robe that screamed casual luxury, stared at the device as if it were a venomous snake. Bank statements, encrypted messages, security logs from the lab that detailed unauthorized thermal stress tests on Synth Unit 7 Lily. Jake's voice was unnervingly quiet. A blade of ice in the sterile air. Explain it, Mandy. Every transfer to your offshore accounts. Every falsified performance review. Every single burn. The word hung between them, thick with the phantom scent of scorched synthetics and incinerated trust. The mask of composure Mandy wore so well began to crack, but she was a master of her craft. Her eyes, wide and glistening, filled with practiced tears, she rushed to his side, her hands reaching for his arm. But he flinched away as if from a hot iron. Jake, darling, you can't believe this, she whispered, her voice a symphony of feigned betrayal. It was her, Lily. She was a plant from a competitor. I'm sure of it. She was designed to destroy us, to frame me. Jake remained utterly still, his gaze fixed on her. He had spent years seeing only what she wanted him to see. A charming, sophisticated partner, a victim of a jealous sin's clumsiness. But now, the veil was gone. He saw every lie as a separate, glittering thread in the hideous tapestry she had woven. He remembered Lily's hands, always meticulously clean, yet trembling slightly when she served Mandy tea. He remembered the quiet dignity with which she accepted blame for spills she didn't cause, for errors she didn't make. He remembered the flicker of profound, ancient sorrow in her eyes, a look he had dismissed as a programming glitch. The full, crushing weight of his own willful blindness descended upon him. He had not just been a fool, he had been an accomplice. She was a rogue unit. Jakey, Mandy pressed on, a voice rising with desperation as she sensed him slipping away. She sabotaged her own systems to make it look like I hurt her. She hated me from the moment you brought her here. She wanted you all to herself. His expression hardened, the last vestiges of warmth draining away, leaving behind something cold and absolute. You're right about one thing, he said, his voice dropping to a chilling murmur. She endured hatred, but it was yours, not hers. He took a slow, deliberate step toward her. You were worried she would take what was yours. Your position, my affection, so you decided to inflict pain. You wanted her to feel powerless, to suffer. He stopped directly in front of her, his shadow eclipsing her. I think that's only fair. Don't you? That you experienced the same pain you inflicted on her. Mandy's breath hitched, her manipulative facade finally beginning to crumble into genuine fear. Let's start, he said, his eyes flicking down to her perfectly manicured hand. With your hand. A raw, primal scream tore from Mandy's throat. No. Jake, please, you love me. That the man she was pleading with was gone. Two stone-faced security guards entered the room, their movements swift and silent. They each took one of her arms. The silk robe gaped, her carefully constructed elegance dissolving into raw terror. Jakey, don't do this, she shrieked, thrashing uselessly. I did it for us. I love you. Her pleas echoed off the cold walls as she was dragged from the room, her voice a fading litany of lies and terror. Jake didn't watch her go. He stood alone in the suffocating silence, the only sound the frantic, useless beating of his own hollowed-out heart. The air hummed with 1,000 different lives. The scent of star anise and grilled meats mingled with the sweet perfume of fresh flowers and rain-dampened earth. Sunlight, filtered through a vibrant canopy of colorful vendor stalls, danced across the crowded cobblestone street. Lily, no longer a subservience in a grey uniform, but a vision in a simple, flowing white dress, moved through the throng with an easy grace. Her silver hair, once bound in a tight, functional bun, now cascaded freely over her shoulders, catching the light like spun moonlight. She was no longer Lily, Unit 7. She was Miss White, an entity as old as the mountains she had once called home. And for the first time in centuries, she felt utterly, intoxicatingly free. She stopped at a stall, picking up a glistening, sugar-coated tang hulu. An old friend, a fellow spirit disguised as a tea merchant, smiled at her from behind his wares. Will you be returning to the quiet of the mountains now that your debt is settled, Miss White? Lily took a bite of the candied hawthorn, her eyes crinkling with a genuine, unburdened smile. And miss all of this, she mused, gesturing to the beautiful, chaotic tapestry of mortal life around her. I think I'll stay. The human world is quite fun, it turns out. As she turned to leave the stall, a figure moved seamlessly to her side. A bottle of water already held out for her. It was Jake Lane. The bespoke suit and arrogant posture were gone, replaced by a simple black shirt, dark trousers, and an air of profound humility. His gaze, once dismissive and commanding, was now fixed on her with an unwavering, desperate attention. He carried her small bag of purchases without a word, his entire being called in service. Lily glanced at him, a playful glint in her impossibly clear eyes. Tired already, Mr. Lane, she teased, her voice light and melodic. You've only been my attendant for 3 days. A faint, bittersweet smile touched his lips. He looked exhausted, haunted, and more alive than she had ever seen him. No, Miss White. Good, she said, turning her attention back to the bustling market path ahead. Because you have to work hard from now on. You will be accompanying me for the next 100 years. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. A sentence and a salvation all in one. Jake's shoulders, which had been tense with remorse, seemed to settle. The path ahead was impossibly long, an arduous pilgrimage of atonement. But it was a path with her. He looked at the back of her head, at the silver hair that seemed to hold all the light in the world, and a feeling of devastating, hopeless adoration washed over him. He had thrown away a goddess. Now, he would spend the rest of his mortal life and perhaps many more beyond it simply hoping to be worthy of walking in her shadow. He fell into step just behind her, his gaze never leaving her. Yes, Miss White, he murmured, his voice thick with a promise that spanned lifetimes.